Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. The U.S. Senate has overwhelmingly voted to advance the Lindsey Graham Russia Sanctions Act just hours after President Volodymyr Zelensky's meeting with Donald Trump at the White House and senators on Capitol Hill. As Washington moves to tighten pressure on Moscow while advancing plans for Patriot interceptor production in Ukraine, Kiev is also confronting fresh high-profile corruption investigations that could shape international confidence. Joining us now to discuss it further is Tetiana Shevchuk, Head of International Relations at the Ukrainian Anti-Corruption Action Center. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Good morning.
So, it was also a very positive day on Tuesday for Ukraine. Let's just get a bit of a sense of what President Zelenskyy had to say about all this at that meeting. He had several meetings there on Capitol Hill as well after this bill was passed. So let's just roll that for you now.
First of all, where were Sanctions centers and where were Sanctions for this discussion what with details out Ukraine, and we are thankful that this bill is very important. The sanctions pressure on Russia is very important, and really gives. It's not only about the money, how to stop to finance this war, but it's also a big signal to Europe, big signal to Ukraine, big support to follow it. So I'm very thankful. I hope that positive results.
So he said that at the end, he's hopeful for positive results. So tell us a little bit about your first reaction to this. I mean, how significant, how materially significant it will be for Ukraine?
First and foremost, we hope that this will stop exports of Russian oil and gas, so they will have less money to continue this war, and probably this would be a signal that the war should be stopped as soon as possible. And second of all, it's very important that U.S. finally stepped in because since President Trump came into office, there was a lot of talks, but in fact, real inaction in helping to negotiate the end of the war or to interfere with what's going on. We know that they stopped delivering weapons to Ukraine, so our hope was that they will step up with sanction game. But with Iran war, actually some sanctions were released from Russia. So we hope that those sanctions frontline will intensify.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, we've had a lot of positive momentum with that. We'll see how quickly all this stuff actually rolls out. And one of those things as well, putting actually action to all this, it was also a meeting between President Zelenskyy and also executives of Lockheed Martin. So that's to discuss also that co-production of interceptors. Those are the essential key components, what are needed for the Patriot missile batteries. So this is something that Trump had already promised at the Ankara summit. Is this now moving forward? How, let's say, optimistic are you that this will now roll out and actually help tangibly Ukraine?
It looks very optimistic because we really lack air defense from ballistic missiles, and they make a lot of harm to Ukrainian population, to our energy production and other facilities. So there is hope that in upcoming months this production will come forward, and finally we'll have enough interceptors. However, we should admit that this would not resolve our winter problem. That we don't have enough interceptors for this winter, and we understand that this production of missiles would not help us in short term.
All right, but at the same time, I think an interesting step there, and I think this licensing, once that is actually indeed rolled out, I think that's really key for Ukraine. There's some cooperation as well already discussed, so I think that'll be a good sign. At the same time, though, if we look a little bit closer at what's recently come out, investigators, I believe, in Ukraine have been looking at the Defense Ministry, and in fact, one of the former state secretaries, I believe, at the Ministry of Defense, and looking at an allegation of this individual taking and stealing nearly $1.3 million in international donations. So tell us a bit more of what we know of this investigation, how damaging that could potentially be to Ukraine.
Let me clarify a bit. This was not Ministry of Defense. This was Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This is a small clarification which doesn't resolve the actual problem. Indeed, back in 2022, when all the world wanted to help Ukraine, there were some unscrupulous people who decided to self-enrich. So the nations that people were sending, or it's investigated that even some international organizations were sending to Ukraine were not forwarded to state accounts. They were forwarded to account of a non-profit, and this non-profit was actually not doing their job in charity, but withdrawing this money for personal accounts. This is a very sad story because we cherish trust and help of our helpers, international donors, like private citizens from abroad who help Ukraine. The good sign in this story is that there is hope that this money will be returned, because this is official investigation. It was investigated by MFA itself and Ukrainian National Anti-Corruption Bureau. So there is hope that all the perpetrators will be punished and the money will be returned.
Mm-hmm. On that military note, I did want to actually also connect this to another investigation. That one, as you rightly said, this is from the foreign minister, but another one about the military, I think in Lviv, about housing operation for the military. And there again, we have allegations of wrongdoing, something along the lines of 2.2 million in terms of a bribery scheme. Tell us a bit more about this and what NABU and other kind of authorities are doing in all this, and what that means for the whole justice process.
This is the NABU uncovered the scheme when the servicemen were receiving the housing, just like normal procedure, like part of social package for the soldiers. But instead of fair distribution, there were bribery scheme to give this housing for certain people. Maybe not qualifying for receipt of this housing. So NABU uncovered the scheme. We hope that the case will be investigated quickly and sent to the court. What could I say else? Unfortunately, bribery exists. Corruption is a problem Ukraine is fighting for. The good sign that there is law enforcement working on this, and I would say even quite quick. And I hope that it also is a precautionary measure. So for everyone who consider for themselves to take bribes or enrich themselves in the military, they know that the punishment is inevitable. So they would not commit such crimes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, looking also beyond headlines, I mean, at the same time, we know that the rule of law, justice, fighting corruption, these are key things for any country, but in particular, heavy scrutiny for Ukraine if we're looking at that EU accession process right now. But at the same time, let's look at the bigger picture. I mean, we have these cases like we've just discussed here, but in your experience, do you see this, I mean, the wider and the macro level, are there now more of these kind of cases? Are there less? What does it look like? And if we look at this a little bit more expanded of the past few years, I mean, also looking at some of the positive conclusions out of this in your work.
It's very hard to assess quantitatively whether there is more corruption or less corruption, because like 10 years ago, we didn't have proper investigation and prosecution of corruption crimes. So there is it probably could be a feeling that there is more corruption in Ukraine right now because NABU brings more and more cases. But in fact, it's more of independent and proper investigation that we see. So I hope that in a few years we will have the less of these investigations because there are less cases. But on the other hand, this is what EU is requiring from Ukraine, to show the track record of fighting corruption, and the fighting corruption is investigating and prosecuting corruption.
Mm-hmm. But interesting, you note that there was no such mechanism some 10 years ago. I mean, that is progress in and of itself. I mean, also if we're looking at NABU and SAMPO and all these organizations that are now there and functioning, there's a lot of criticism, but I think at the same time it deserves to be mentioned that this is something unique and new. Tell us also in terms of the public. I mean, there's a lot of call for accountability. We've seen that recently as well. I mean, the case with Fedorov and people on the streets, but generally with corruption, how is this seen by the Ukrainian people? Is there now more trust when we have these kind of high-profile cases? Is it the other way around? How does the public in Ukraine interpret all this?
So basically, what we now see that when we find out about corruption from NABU and SAPO, then they announce that there is investigation. And previously, we knew about corruption from journalist investigation or words on the street. And there was a huge feeling on injustice that you can steal a lot of money and you will just be a rich man, and there was feeling of injustice in society. Now when there is information about corruption, it comes from the law enforcement, and there is feeling that the justice finally will be served, and those who committed some corruption crimes will be punished. So in this way, the feeling changed, but still the demand of the people to have less corrupt country, to have more justice country, it's rising. And probably the war is one of the key reasons, because war brings a lot of injustice to the people's life. Coming to the issue with Fedorov, I think this is the same feeling of justice that brought people to the streets this year once again, because people felt that his dismissal was unjust, and he was indeed trying to introduce some anti-corruption mechanisms in procurement of drones and weapons, and people felt that if he's gone, probably this could be stopped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we've seen that as well. I mean, it's high profile in terms of a lot of these cases, but we do see the efforts by authorities in Ukraine to bring accountability. So that has to be commended in its own right. So look, we'll have to close it there, I'm afraid, but thank you so much for all that. Really appreciate all your insights there. That was our guest today, Tetiana Shevchuk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching World Talks, but do stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.